Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. We have officially entered the most wonderful time of the year. I don't know about you, but I love the periods leading up to Christmas because I love the combination of chilly weather, jumpers, cozying up by the fireplace, having quiet nights in, and just popping on a festive movie to get into that festive mood. Despite the year end could also get quite hectic with last minute Christmas shopping, obviously, and with people trying to wrap up their work and close out the year. But the happiness and festivities in the air usually also mean people tend to be a tad more relaxed, and in general, you just see more smiles all around. No matter where you are, I hope that you are having a wonderful December. Now, for this episode, we are going to just have a casual chat as season two comes to an end. I think it might be a good idea for us to go through 22 moments from season two and maybe a bit of the year of 2022 in general. So go get a cup of tea, get comfortable, and we will dive right in. Number 22. Season 2 kicked off back in June during Pride Month when we were so glad to be able to have Filipino American author and sociology professor Anthony Ocampo, who also appeared in the Netflix documentary White Hot: The Rise and Fall of Abercrombie and Fitch, joining us to begin season 2 with a conversation about growing up brown and gay in LA.
It's really hard to give advice on this because every family is different. But what I would say is that, well, the least you can do is to not stigmatize people for expressing their gender in a way that doesn't quote unquote fit with your perception of what gender should look like. So for example, like if you have young boys that want to play with dolls or want to put on a dress, like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you have little girls that want to play with trucks and do quote unquote boy things, there's nothing wrong with that either. And I think a lot of times what I see even in this day and age, like in the year 2022, I see a lot of parents that like scream at their young boys who want to play dress up or want to play with dolls or want to pretend to be girls. And same thing with their little girls that want to do quote unquote boyish things. So don't do that. I think that you should just let kids be kids and whatever they enjoy. Let them express themselves because it's really beautiful to see them play with different different ideas about who they are. That's awesome. I think the other thing too for relatives, one thing I would say is that if you have young kids, don't always like pressure them with the story of like, oh, to a young man, oh, when you marry a nice girl or when you have a girlfriend or vice versa to a young girl, oh, when you find a boyfriend one day, because a lot of times those are statements that stress kids out if they already know that they're queer. And so I think little gestures like saying, oh, whoever you fall in love with, whatever they may be, whether it's a boy or girl or someone that has no gender, like that's a really subtle thing that parents and other relatives can say, but it's really, really powerful message. It's a really powerful way to signal to kids that you're not expecting them to be straight.
Number 21. Now, what gave us the idea to kickstart Proudly Asian Food Month was that we thought one of the best ways to understand the culture is through trying out its cuisine. This is what gave us the idea to launch Proudly Asian Food Month back in July to highlight underrepresented Asian cuisines. So we got to understand Burmese, Tibetan, Lao cultures, and even some creative elderly care food through chefs and F&B business owners from around the world. Now, here's the founder of Hong Kong's first Burmese restaurant, Nelson Tu, teaching us a Burmese phrase that he thinks best encapsulates the Burmese culture in episode 21.
I would say sabi bila. It basically means have you eaten? Like I said, it's very versatile line. I can go from asking your family members just, as easy as sabi bila, or even as a pickup line if you're Burmese and you're listening to this podcast, you know what I'm talking about.
Sabi bila, have you eaten? And the other highlight from the Proudly Asian Food Month that I wanted to include in this episode is when Lao American chef Sang Duang Dara tells us in episode 24 how far Lao food has come in the US.
So there is the Lao food movement happening within the past few years now, and Chef Sang in Washington D.C., who owns the restaurant Dik Kao, she was the one that is started it, created it, and is really paving the way for a lot of my the stuff I do and other future Lao chefs. And so I think before then there was always this undertone of like, oh, like Lao food, you have to ask the you have to go to Thai restaurants and ask for their secret menu, which is usually a Lao cook that's cooking at the Thai restaurant. Um, and so that's a whole other like story, but essentially it's so a lot of people that came over here in 75, they, their degrees didn't matter anymore. Their jobs, their amazing jobs in Laos, they didn't matter anymore. So they had to start from scratch. And the only thing they knew is a lot of the things they knew is like how to cook and how to make delicious foods. But at that time, they noticed that Thai food was well marketed. Everyone knew about Thai food. It was a huge wave. And so they kind of joined that wave in saying, okay, we can open up a Thai restaurant because we don't have to work on the marketing and people already know it. And since that's our sister country, we know how to make the food. And so that kind of was the start of a lot of Lao refugees opening up Thai restaurants across the United States. And so coming into, I think, the 1990s to now, I think that's when we have a really big surge of a lot of people, Lao people feeling confident and empowered in their identity and their food, and really showing off that, okay, I don't have to be behind another cuisine. I can, step forward and really shine bright. And I think it's like the fear that other people may not like your food, but it's also the reminder that your food is not going to be liked by everyone, but the ones that do will continuously come and support your restaurant.
Number 20. Now, because of Proudly Asian Food Month, I also made it a mission that I should be trying out a wider range of Asian cuisines other than my go-to. So because of that, I got to try out Burmese cuisine for the first time ever. I went to the Burmese restaurant owned by our guest for episode 21, Nelson. He runs this lovely restaurant called Club Rangoon, which happens to be the first Burmese restaurant in Hong Kong as well. I remember being so blown away by all the dishes and the flavors, like their signature dish mohinga, which is also the national dish of Burma. I also went around the time of my birthday. So when the dessert came, which was a lovely Burmese milk tea ice cream, they started playing the birthday song in the restaurant, and the staff actually brought out a beautiful Burmese umbrella for me to take pictures with the birthday dessert. So it was an absolutely amazing experience. And a lot of you during the Proudly Asian Food Month also send us DMs with pictures about the cuisines that you had growing up. So it was just a really wonderful month getting to know you all through the food that you love and eat every day. And if you want to keep showing us the Asian food that you love, feel free to tag or check out the hashtag Proudly Asian Food Month on Instagram to show us dishes that you think everyone should try out. Number 19. Other than celebrating the achievements and moments of triumphs of Asians around the world, we also want to normalize vulnerability. We need to normalize the fact that it's not just success and glitzy moments that are worth celebrating. How we push through in moments of darkness, and how we stand up for ourselves, for our own sanity, when no one seems to be on our side, are moments that are equally worth celebrating, if not more. So that's why around Mental Health Day back in October, we rolled out a mini mental health series focusing on different topics such as workplace mental health, setting boundaries, and finding the right therapist. We hope those episodes also helped you find some actionable solutions to maintain your own mental health as well. And one of the episodes that you guys kept messaging us about and telling us how it gave you a lot of useful tips on how to set your own boundaries was the one where we sat down for a chat with Scottish Chinese soul coach Coco Alexandra.
I think one thing to be more aware of as, children, is that our parents didn't learn about boundaries from their parents, right? We're thinking about they went through the World War. Their life span was always about life or death. Like, if you don't do this, it's like you die. If you do this, then you survive. It's always like survival of the fittest, right? And so their mentality is very different, our grandparents. And so that's what they teach our parents, right? But then it gets to our generation where oh, okay, we didn't have to experience a war or anything, but we have this new type of lifestyle. And I think we are kind of those generational breakers who are okay, parents, we need to stop this cycle of overstepping, over speaking, over whatever, and just kind of set the ground rules with them. And I think it's a little bit more difficult in Asian families and Asian cultures because I think I'm generalizing, by the way. Of course, a lot of Asian families kind of live together, grow up together. There's no personal space, one. And everyone's always in your business. That's just kind of how Asian families are, right? And so you need to be aware of that, one. But you also need to have a sense of bravery and confidence to be that one person who speaks up and be like, hey guys, how much weight I've gained over Chinese New Year is not table talk. Sorry. Let's talk about something else. Having that level of awareness and confidence to actually say something and not thinking about, oh, but maybe they'll just shut me down. That's another issue, right? If they shut you down, that's on them. But at least you spoke up and you said what you needed to say, right? I think when it's coming to setting up boundaries, I think one really big thing that always comes up with a lot of my clients is that, oh, but I don't want the other person to think that I'm disrespecting them, or I don't want them to think that I'm not being nice, or blah, blah, blah. But babes, it's not about being nice or not. Just remembering the boundaries that you set is a container in which you set to protect yourself, whether it's energetically, emotionally, or even your time. Right? And when you set those boundaries, it's this invisible line that you show people what you're okay with and what you're not okay with.
Number 18. We also explored the topic of identity quite a bit in season 2. So for episode 35, we spoke with Jasmine Ross, a British girl born and raised in Japan and never lived in the UK. When Jasmine's episode came out, it sparked quite a bit of discussion across different platforms, including LinkedIn and YouTube, where there are people questioning the believability of Jasmine's story. And some comments actually read like, she has a British accent. I doubt she grew up in Japan. It was so interesting watching all the debates unfold on different platforms about Jasmine's story and identity, because one of the reasons why I decided to produce the episode was to challenge people's perception about identity and bring to light the very problem that people genuinely do think they have a say about a stranger's identity and upbringing. And those people who left those comments questioning Jasmine's identity just validate the concept of the episode.
Identities are probably different for every single person. We all have different fingerprints, right? I think identity is basically our own, fingerprint, and everybody has a different version of it. So there might be some people who are 100% Japanese blood, for example, 100%, ethnically Japanese, and they define themselves as, yes, we are Japanese because we're Japanese blood, and that's okay. And there might be Asians in America who define themselves as, Japanese because of their blood, or they define themselves as more American. I think they can still be both, but like depending on the people, there might be more emphasis towards like, no, I'm American, I don't know anything about Japan, versus no, I have, Japanese blood in me, I want to respect and, treasure that culture. I identify more as Japanese. I think there are different ways of identifying yourself depending on the person. So as much as this question is often asked in this day and age, I think it's really it almost asked too often, as in like, do we have to have like a certain rule for identity? And it's probably why I always kind of stiffen up a little bit when people ask me about my identity, because it's like, let's figuring it out, I think. And it doesn't have to be one way or another, and I think the answer can be different for everybody.
And here's also how our guest, Anthony Ocampo, sees the concept of identity from the sociology point of view.
I mean, that's a hard question, right? Because if you say that it's lived experience, like what do you do with for example, like a white person that grows up in a predominantly black neighborhood, all of us, do they have the liberty to identify as black? Well, probably not, even though their lived experience is in a neighborhood where they're surrounded by mostly black residents. Is it by blood? Like I hesitate about that question too, because we have a long history of using bloodline as a way to discriminate or to exclude people from accessing their basic rights. So like, I think there's a lot of countries where bloodline is the determinant for whether you can gain citizenship. And what does that mean if you're not part of that bloodline, but you've had people living there for generations? It's kind of messed up. And I think I live in the United States, where this is a country where bloodline, if you were even 1/32nd African descent, it means you're black, and what that meant is you can't have access to the same rights that white people can. And so it's really complicated. I think to a little cop out to your question, I think it's all of those things put together. It's like it's kind of like an equation where it's not just what you look like, it's not just who your parents are, it's not just what country you're born in, but it's a combination of those things, and from those things you make a determination of who belongs and who doesn't. I think that when it comes to identities like Asian, a lot of people forget that the term Asian, they think it's like a real identity with like some genetic foundation, but in reality, the term Asian is, a sociologist like to say, socially constructed. So in the United States, we didn't even have people identifying as Asian until the 1960s. It was a group of activists who were Filipino, Chinese, Japanese. They were like, you know what, we're getting really screwed in this country. We're experiencing a lot of racism, but our numbers are quite small, so we should band together and let's create a new identity called Asian American so that we can fight for our civil rights in the same way that like Black people, Mexican Americans, women are doing at the same time.
And our guest for episode 27, Dr. Daisy Tam, who is an associate humanities professor, offers insights into how people can identify themselves as we live in a world where skin color, ethnicity no longer really give information about where a person is from.
This idea of identity that has to be tied either to blood, your sort of genetics, or your identity that is tied to the place you were born, I think that's quite outdated. I think especially these third culture kids, that's great. They might not be ethnically Chinese, right? But they were born in Hong Kong, and they might or might not learn the language. I think it's important to speak different languages, because I think those are gateways to understanding of different cultures, and it opens so many doors. So I think that's important. But for third culture kids, I would just say, well, why don't you identify with, your interests, right? I love swimming. I identify very much with the old people that go swimming every single day, every single morning. I think I'm part of them. I feel a sense of belonging with that group. And I also identify with people who share my values, right? More diverse, more inclusive society. So I think that's the other thing to that question of diversity. And in Hong Kong, I think we're very diverse, but but the integration is not great. We never learnt how to see them as one, or to see these kind of different facets of Hong Kong society. We're still painting that one picture.
Number 17. To further explore the theme of identity, we also had so much fun creating a magazine-style episode for episode 36. We aimed to create a listening experience that will invite people to think deeper about the concept of identity by presenting the stories of multiple people who have an in-between identity or regularly have their identities denied or simply dismissed because they so-called don't look the part. And it was so lovely to receive some messages from you guys saying that the episode was quite thought-provoking, and some of you actually said to me the kind of listening experience we curated in that episode made you feel like you were transported to the countryside in Canada because it was so calming, relaxing, yet thought-provoking. So thank you so much for everyone who sent us message and let us know what you think about that magazine-style episode. And we hope that we can curate more listening experiences for you on Proudly Asian in the next season. Number 16. We also got to widen the representation of different types of Asians in season 2, including Mongolian, Filipino, Malaysian, Burmese, Tibetan, Lao, Indonesian, and also Thai cultures. We ended up learning very, very interesting facts about different places, such as this fun fact confirmed by our guest for episode 18, who is Mongolian YouTuber Anil Hashcho. Another fun fact about Mongolia that I read on the internet is that mothers who give birth to 5 children or more are rewarded with an honored mother award. Is this fact?
It's a fact.
Oh, is it?
It's a fact. I mean, that's pretty bizarre for me, but it is a fact. I mean, awarded like medals on their shoulder, like one of those military medals that people get. Like it's similar, but it do have like mother holding their babies and such. Wow. So mothers who have, I think it's like 4 or more kids do get that medals. But I think there's a tier to it. Like third tier is like 4 kids. Like next one is like 5 or 6 kids. So if you keep having babies, like different tiers of medals are unlocked for you. But I don't have like the numbers per se, but I think there are around like 3 tiers or so. So what you read on the internet on that end is a fact.
Number 15. We also tried to address and highlight more stereotypes against Asians. A lot of the times, stereotypes or biases against, Filipinos could also be coming from fellow Asians as well, not just, from the Western crowd.
Yes.
I just want to know, what are some of the common misconceptions about the Philippines or stereotypes about Filipinos that you have heard of that you thought was quite ridiculous?
Number 1 is the accent. If they hear like that you have at least a neutral accent or in a way like like an Americanized accent, they would be like, oh, your accent's different. You don't sound Filipino. Like, how should I sound? I mean, I know you've seen it probably on social media, how they make it as a joke, like the Filipino English accent. But it's not like that. I mean, so maybe that's one thing. I really find it ridiculous. Like, okay, I'm sorry for not sounding Filipino enough for you. That's like always in my head because I usually get that comment, oh, your English is very nice. I'm like, thank you. But is it a compliment? Like, what do you expect? Or they'll be like, oh, you have an accent. I'm like, yes. Or sometimes they feel like you're trying too hard. You shouldn't sound that way. So that's like top of mind, like, it's crazy. Like, okay, I'm sorry, I don't sound like Filipino English to you, but that's one thing. And then I guess the other like stereotypes that I've heard, especially when I'm here, is that when they ask me what my job is and I don't say a nurse, they'll be like, oh, And what would I take of that? Oh, so I met a couple of friends. Wherein when they asked me, "Oh, what do you do?" Like, okay, I'll tell them what I do, and they're like, "Oh, you're not a nurse." I'm like, "Yes." And the next question is, "Why?" Like, why not? I mean, I know it's like an innocent question for them because, again, because of the stereotypes. That's what they know. Like, oh, okay, you're a Filipina in the US, you must be a nurse, or you must be studying, nursing or whatnot. So those are the main two things that I personally experience here in LA. I also know that there's more. For example, if you're like a Filipina here in the US, it's either you married someone here, or if you have like, oh, I have my family here, my mom, my dad, usually they will say, oh, did your mother marry like a foreigner just to get a green card? That's also very ridiculous. They always use it as a joke. So like they will tell me, oh, just marry someone here so you could stay here forever. And I'm like, what? Yeah, the fastest way to get a visa is to just marry a foreigner and get a green card. Is that what you think about Filipinos? We will do anything and everything just to be in the US? Like, no, we have other ways.
Number 14. I'm also glad that we got to touch on toxic body image in Asian cultures in this season.
In Asia, because of the ways that we, especially in Hong Kong, I would say, where there is this very rushed culture, where we're constantly trying to be more efficient with things. And we tie desirable outcomes not just to actually getting there, but getting there fast. So when we think about, what diet culture is basically saying at its core is that your morality, your character as a person is tied to the way that your body looks. So if you're thinner, you're more disciplined, more successful, more awesome. There's everything going for you. I think when we try to think about Hong Kong's productivity culture, it makes sense why diet products sell so well, especially the ones that say lose weight in 30 days, like fit and fab, all the stuff where you see before and after photos of someone who is really struggling to someone who is really, shining and energized. It makes sense why the diet industry it booms so much.
Number 13, we also challenged whether the current form of education is taking a toll on everyone's mental health.
There's this strong sort of achievement orientation, I guess is the easiest way to describe it, and that adds a lot of pressure as for someone who's only 13, 14, 15. For me, I think intrinsic motivation as opposed to extrinsic motivation is far more likely to be beneficial for your mental health. If you're not if you're not driven by the grades, there was this book I read a while ago, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and one part that really stood out to me was they were describing a classroom which the outcome had no grades. Everyone would get an A, everyone would pass, and so the only idea was how do the individuals show up in class. And sure, they had a population that dropped out, maybe 10, 15%, but then the rest of the class that decided to continue and show up actually just showed a lot of creativity, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of intrinsic motivation. And I think it's worth examining what happens when you remove these like external achievements or external sort of like benchmarks of what good is, and then you really sort of nail down on what truly motivates an individual, what excites them, what unleashes that creativity. I think it could be a really fascinating world that we live in if we didn't have so many external expectations. And
Number 12, we're so glad to have Christina Ho, who is a Hong Kong airline pilot who transitioned from being a fashion designer, then flight attendant, to now as a pilot, to share with us some of her wisdom that she picked up along the way.
Do not wait until you're perfect. I know it's very important to prepare yourself and knowing why you're going for it. But at the same time, you also don't wait too long, because life is so short, and also you don't know what happened next moment. You don't know COVID is coming. You don't know like what you have to concern about the next moment. And so I still remember in the beginning when I first having that thought of, oh, I want to go for this. I know nothing about this industry. I have a friend who also want to go for it. I just asked him, oh, you know anything about this? Can we go look for someone that giving us a few advices that what we can do about it? And then he was the one who helped me through that little struggling process. But then after I finished my training and return, and then I know that he still didn't apply for it. So I just feel like life is so short. Don't just go for it. Also, no matter you hit it or not, you have already gained experience and you know yourself better. And having that thing to try is already win like half of it.
Number 11. Because of the inspiration from Christina, I also did not wait until I was perfect or confident enough. So I signed up for a flying lesson during the summer when I was in California and logged my first ever flight as an aspiring pilot. I know this is a rather personal moment, but as I mentioned earlier in the episode, some of these moments are going to be about 2022 in general, so don't mind me. And obviously for this moment, this time, I was not just a passenger. I had control of the aircraft and performed the takeoff and did some basic maneuvering, essentially realizing my childhood dream of actually flying a plane, and I absolutely loved every single moment of that experience. Number 10. Obviously, I mentioned I was in California for the summer. So yeah, actually I spent a month in California, and that also means we got to fly out for the first time in 3 years because of COVID restrictions in Hong Kong, where we're currently based. And some of you actually so kindly sent us care packages when I was in the US. So shout out to Kat from Subtle Asian Baking, Lingji from Worst Asian Podcast, and also Annie from Ube Books. Number 9. For some of the listeners who have been sticking around for Proudly Asian, you would have heard me talking about this Vietnamese restaurant in California that I wouldn't stop talking about. It's called First Starbo, that's in Riverside, California. And being able to spend a month in California this summer also meant that I was able to go back to First Starbo, yes. And I ended up going back for maybe about 3 to 4 times. I thought I would go back more, but yeah, anyway. And I also got to try out and check out the 626 night market. After spending years watching the Fung Bros, checking out the famous 626 night market, I finally got to experience it myself. Number 8. Now, back to Proudly Asian highlights, I put down launching Proudly Asian Season 2 because honestly, I could hardly imagine we would be able to launch a second season within the first year of launch. I remember when I first launched Proudly Asian, I thought to myself, if I could do 5 episodes, that would be a win already. But look at us, 39 episodes in, and we're still going. Number 7. In May, during the AAPI Heritage Month, Proudly Asian was featured for the first time ever on Apple Podcasts' US front page. I woke up in the morning and saw Proudly Asian was tagged in someone's social media post, and then I saw our logo showing on what appeared to be a screenshot of Apple Podcasts. I just couldn't believe my own eyes, because after about maybe 10 minutes of finding out what actually happened and processing, the whole thing, I cried because that was the moment that I realized we weren't just talking to the void, and I was not the only listener of the Proudly Asian podcast. It was real. Someone actually knew about us and might have listened to us. And then thankfully, later on, we've been handpicked and featured by Spotify US and also given a front page carousel feature on Apple Podcasts Hong Kong. So here I just want to say thank you to the editors and Apple Podcasts and Spotify teams for featuring us, because it really did help people discover us, and we were then able to be connected with more people who find the stories that we tell on Proudly Asian relatable. So thank you so much. Number 6. In August, we were told that we were among the finalists for People's Choice Best Asian Hosted Podcast. At that point, I was actually quite grateful for all the listeners who have been sticking with us and the friendships we've made along the way. And awards weren't really on our radar at that particular point, but nonetheless, it was once again a lovely recognition, and we thank everyone for playing a part in keeping us going on this journey. Number 5. Speaking of awards, obviously we can't forget to mention the very fun Instagram live we did back in May with Curtis from the Infatuation podcast and Ben and Linji from the Worst Asian podcast, which was hosted by Kat from Subtle Asian Baking. I got to put my non-existent baking skills to the test and actually won the Subtle Asian Bake Off because bakers over on Subtle Asian Baking so kindly voted for my ube pancakes. And of course, one of the highlights is definitely the promo video we did that was inspired by the OG Iron Chef. For those who want to check out the promo video, which gave me really sore legs after filming it, or even the live itself, you can find them on our Instagram page still, so go check them out. Number 4. Obviously, one of the most beautiful things creating Proudly Asian is meeting podcaster friends and audience from around the world. You have no idea how much I enjoy being a part of a community of podcasters and also being connected with all of you who are based in many different countries, and having you telling me about your stories is just so beautiful. And actually, during the year, I also got to meet some of you in real life, and those are really magical moments. So I'm very thankful for those of you who also always message us and tell us about what you think about the latest episode and just the topics that we discuss in the show. Number 3. I'm just going to quickly mention this, as previously some of you asked if there are any other ways to further support Proudly Asian. We do have a Ko-fi page that will make it easy for everyone to buy us a coffee, and if that's what you want to do as well. So as some of you might know, Proudly Asian is a one-woman operation. That means a lot of late nights and non-existent weekends, as I am constantly recording new episodes, reaching out to guests, researching while managing our social media pages, creating and maintaining our website, and editing videos. So everything that you see and hear on Proudly Asian and all our social channels is pretty much done by myself. So if you would like to buy me a coffee, you can find the link to our Ko-fi page at our link in bio on Instagram, or click the support us button on our official website, proudly-asian.com. But again, don't feel obligated to do it. Listening to the podcast and telling your friends about us is also the most effective way to support us as well. Number 2. For the last 2 highlights, I would like to get a little bit more personal and just basically talk about what I personally learned from Proudly Asian. Of all the many important lessons that I've learned from our guests on Proudly Asian and also through interacting with our listeners and podcaster friends, I learned that there's this very space for I don't know. Because the world is so solution driven, sometimes we forget to appreciate the beauty of not knowing and not having an answer. What matters is not what we know currently. Instead, it is the courage to admit that there are things we don't know. And through speaking to the guests on Proudly Asian, I'm learning so much on how to see different things, such as identity and cultures, from angles that I was not really familiar with. And I hope some of you might feel the same way as well when listening to our episodes. Because through these conversations I had on Proudly Asian, I also sometimes feel like I'm unlearning some preconditioned beliefs and rediscovering my identity also. And Proudly Asian is exactly that platform that invites people to challenge what they know. We are a platform that asks questions, that also inspires people to think about whether the world that they think they know is actually truly the world that we live in. Why should we limit people around us to just one identity? And why do we tend to think there's only one way to define identity? So these are the conversations that we'll continue to have on Proudly Asian. And for our show, we share the stories of Asians from around the world, right? But the way that we approach the identity conversation does not only apply to Asians. At the end of the day, Asian stories are also stories of people. They are not exotic. They are just stories about you and I. Finally, number 1. This is not really a moment, but basically a key lesson that I learned in 2022. And it all goes back to the question of, who am I? This is the very question that I've asked myself since I was a teenager, and that would eventually obviously sow the seeds of Proudly Asian. And for a very long time, up until the moment before I started Proudly Asian, I always tried to search for the answer of who am I? For example, professionally, am I a TV anchor, video producer, moderator? But neither one of these titles I just mentioned perfectly describes what I can do, because I am all of them. But is there a label that combines all of them? No, not really, or at least I couldn't find it myself. And the guests on Proudly Asian also taught me that we all don't really have the actual answer for the question, who am I? Proudly Asian also gives me the platform to do everything I'm capable of doing without having to settle on a title or label that does not quite tell who I am as a person and what I'm capable of doing. I am Proudly Asian, whether as the founder, podcast host, producer, or even just someone who's born into such a multifaceted ethnic identity. Eventually, I learned to stop searching for that one label that describes who I am and what I can do. In a way, searching for that label also means somehow we are seeking permission to do something. But one analogy I really love is the sun does not ask for permission to shine, generate heat, while indirectly keeping everything on Earth alive by providing sunlight for plants to grow, providing food and oxygen for humans through plants, and keeping the Earth from freezing. You know, if the sun tries to find a label that will only allow it to do one of the functions I just mentioned there, nothing on Earth would survive. So while it's human nature to find where we belong, don't forget to just do what you do best, and don't ask for permission to shine. And with that, I would like to leave you with this last nugget of wisdom from season 2. Just don't let anyone tell you that you are too XYZ to do a certain thing. Because people who say that, they know nothing about your life, how far you have come, and what you will be capable of. They can't tell the future for you. So don't ever give people that power over your life. You need to own, the life decision, the narrative. You need to really stay anchored, which I know is very, very hard for a kid. Thank you for staying with us until the end. For the next few weeks, we'll be going on a break to catch up on sleep and spend quality time with our loved ones. Proudly Asian Season 3 will be back in January 2023. See you then, and wishing you the most wonderful festive season. Happy holidays, and I'll see you in the new year. Love you. Bye for now.
Silent night, I only have one wish for the shooting star. Holy night, send me someone to love so I can hold their hand while we're ice skating around the streets, Central Park. Kiss them under the mistletoe. Oh, I want a Christmas kind of spark. Santa Claus, do you know Cupid? Send his arrow straight to my heart. I wanna fall in love this Christmas. Santa, that would be the greatest gift of all. Turtle doves and all my favorite things come in sets of two. So does love. Send me someone I can talk to. We'll share stories of our childhood memories of Christmas past. Chestnuts on an open fire and another log to make it last. We'll build Frosty the Snowman and dance along with the Christmas band, and then we'll frolic like two old lovebirds walking around a winter wonderland. Santa Claus, do you know Cupid? Send his arrow straight to my heart.